Lightning tears through the sky above the dark silhouette of the Demon Lord's castle, setting a grim stage for the final battle. Within the fortress, the Demon Lord clashes with the hero's party, scoffing at the audacity of mere humans challenging his supremacy. Arrogance turns to shock as the Dark Ruler realizes he is actually being overpowered by these mortal adversaries. Refusing to accept defeat, the cornered entity begins to channel a desperate and dangerous magic. He declares with spiteful resolve that he will not perish without dragging his enemies down with him. A hooded mage among the heroes notices the gathering energy and screams a frantic warning to the swordsman. Moving with instant desperation, the mage throws himself into the path of the lethal attack to shield the hero. Leia screams the name Alex in horror as his companion takes the devastating blow meant for him. Overcome with fury, the hero curses the Demon Lord for exacting such a cruel price. He immediately commands the healer Lilith to use her magic to save Alex from the brink of death. Lilith rushes to assist but recoils in terror as she realizes her healing spells are ineffective. She frantically explains that a peculiar effect is nullifying her magic, leaving her helpless to stop the bleeding. Alex smiles weakly, telling Lilith to stop her efforts as he knows his life is already fading. Lilith watches in despair as the dying mage turns to Laius to whisper one final message. He gathers his remaining strength to address Laius and the rest of the party. With profound gratitude, he thanks them for accepting a commoner like him as their companion. Laius weeps, asking why Alex protected him when it should have been the other way around. The party mourns the loss of a man they respected deeply for becoming an Archmage without the blessing of God. Internally, Alex rejects the grandeur of a final goodbye, clinging to his identity as a simple commoner. He reflects on the inherent barrier between himself and the nobles who possess God's blood in their lineage. He laments that lacking this noble blood made it impossible for him to ever master close-quarters combat. Despite his lifelong efforts, magic power was the only strength he could ever truly claim. Yet even with his mastery of magic, he felt an unbridgeable gap remained. He compares himself to Laius, acknowledging that the hero's potential was always superior. Laius stands in his memory as the ultimate magic swordsman and humanity's strongest weapon. Alex views Laius as the true lead actor of their tale, while he was merely a supporting character exiting the stage. As darkness takes him, he wonders if noble blood would have allowed him to stand as Laius's equal. He confesses his deep yearning to have been the kind of courageous hero that everyone admires. His final conscious thought is a wish to have been the main character of his own story. The world dissolves into absolute nothingness as his life finally extinguishes. Consciousness returns in a void where he overhears a voice analyzing his magic and rank. Paralyzed and confused, he wonders if he survived and if the S-rank assassin mentioned by the voice saved him. His eyes open to see a tiny hand, and he realizes with shock that it belongs to him. Panic surges as he comprehends he is now an infant and tries to understand his situation. An assassin stands over his crib, remarking on the cruelty of being hired to kill a baby. The killer shrugs off the morality of the act, focusing only on his payment. The reincarnated Alex realizes that despite the confusion, he faces immediate danger. He understands that if he does not act, he will be murdered in his crib. Desperate, he attempts to summon ultimate tier magic, unsure if his infant body can handle the strain. The assassin raises his weapon, callously telling the baby to resent his own birth. Alex unleashes the spell Infinity God's piercing finger directly at his attacker. A blinding beam of energy erupts from the crib, obliterating the assassin in an instant. Magical residue swirls violently in the air as the aftershock of the spell settles. A colossal pillar of light pierces the sky, marking the release of immense power from the nursery. Silence returns to the room, the threat neutralized by the impossible magic of the infant. Alex is stunned that he could use such magic but is bewildered by the reality of his new existence. 12 years pass since that chaotic night. A young girl rises from a bath, water cascading from her hair. A maid attends to her, drying her skin with a towel as she steps out. The girl politely dismisses the help, stating she will choose her own clothes. The maid bows respectfully and acknowledges the order. Once alone, the girl leaps onto her bed and sighs with relief. She identifies herself as Evangeline Kingsley, still adjusting to being reborn as a girl. She marvels at the strange irony of her new life. She reveals she is the daughter of a concubine to the emperor in the very country Laius founded. Evangeline muses on the complicated nature of her status as an imperial princess. She narrates her daily life as a noble, noting she has grown accustomed to the routine. Her mornings involve waking early and being dressed in elaborate frilly clothes. Her schedule is packed with strict manner training. She also endures rigorous language studies as part of her royal education. Piano lessons are yet another requirement she must fulfill. She recalls how the constant assistance of servants, even for bathing, initially startled her. She laughs awkwardly at the memory of being scrubbed by others. Despite her new life, she declares that her dream from the previous era remains unchanged. She activates level 5 physical reinforcement, determined to surpass Laius. Her body glows with magical energy as she flexes her muscles. She vows to become the strongest being in the world. Using gravity magic to add resistance, she begins her secret workout. She strains against the magical weight, grunting with effort. She counts off the final repetitions of her training set. She shouts in triumph as she reaches 1,000 repetitions. Looking at her hand, she marvels at the potential of her royal bloodline. She notes that while her magic was always high, her new body is gaining significant physical strength. She resolves to exploit her reincarnation into the royal family to its fullest potential. She describes her regimen of working out during free time and meditating during lessons to control her magic. Evangeline admits that the gap between her and Laius is still significant. However, she smiles with confidence, knowing she is making solid progress. A maid suddenly interrupts, entering the room with a message from her mother. The maid freezes as she sees Evangeline physically lifting the heavy bed with one hand. The servant stammers in sheer shock at the unladylike display. Evangeline realizes she has been caught and panics. The terrified maid runs from the room screaming that the princess is lifting weights. Defeated, Evangeline hides under the bed covers, knowing her secret muscle training is exposed. She sulks about her barbells being confiscated recently and insists that being strong should be seen as healthy. Evangeline laments the sheer inconvenience of living as a noble lady while walking through the palace grounds. She arrives at the training grounds where the rhythmic sounds of combat practice echo from within. Peering inside, she spots her brother Christopher locked in a heated spar with the family butler, Seabass. She loudly interrupts their session to greet her brother and the butler with enthusiasm. Christopher looks annoyed at her arrival, correctly guessing she has come to beg for sword lessons again. Seabass tries to be polite, but Christopher dismissively tells her to give up on the idea entirely. Her brother turns his back on her, instructing Seabass to ignore her so they can continue their practice. Evangeline sighs deeply, frustrated by their refusal to take her martial ambitions seriously. Internally, she acknowledges that physical training alone has limits and she needs practical experience. She reasons that without actual combat practice with a blade, she will be helpless in a real fight. Christopher mocks her persistence, asking if she really finds training her body to be that much fun. Their conversation is cut short by the sudden, imposing arrival of Evangeline's mother. The mother dramatically declares that beauty is the ultimate pleasure in life. She repeats her statement for emphasis, making it clear that aesthetics are her highest priority. She scolds Evangeline, accusing her of only ever thinking about unrefined activities like push-ups. Evangeline braces herself for a lecture, realizing a maid must have reported her secret workouts. Her mother's expression softens into one of deep melancholy as she looks at her daughter. She brings up the traumatic incident from Evangeline's infancy where an assassin nearly killed her. She asks if that lingering trauma is the reason Evangeline is so obsessed with self-defense. Evangeline seizes the convenient excuse, loudly confirming that fear is indeed her motivation. She passionately argues that as an imperial princess, she faces many dangers and must be strong enough to protect herself. Her mother seems to sympathize with this reasoning, understanding the desire for safety. However, she points out the absurdity of a princess hoarding dumbbells and practicing shadow boxing at night. She asks Evangeline if she has any idea what kind of rumors her eccentric behavior is generating in high society. Evangeline hopefully imagines cool titles like Miss Barbell or The Burning Fighting Spirit. She even considers the Armored Princess as a possibility. Her mother ruthlessly shatters these delusions, revealing the harsh reality of her reputation. Snapping her fan shut in anger, the mother prepares to deliver her final judgment. She slams a book down on a nearby surface, declaring that from this point on, all muscle training is forbidden. She vows never to approve of it, effectively banning Evangeline from the training grounds forever. She insists that an imperial princess has absolutely no need for armor or physical strength. She demands that Evangeline act like a genuine, normal princess from now on. Evangeline admits to herself that this is a logical and expected reaction from a parent. Despite the prohibition, she refuses to back down and shouts her desire to study the blade. She declares she cannot lose this argument because her ultimate goal is to surpass the hero Laius. Her mother sighs, appearing to concede to her daughter's immense stubbornness. She turns to the butler, calling him by name to issue a specific instruction. She decides that experiencing a bitter defeat is the only way Evangeline will truly understand reality. Evangeline looks up in surprise, realizing her mother is giving her a chance to prove herself. Her mother snaps her fan again, stating firmly that fighting is a job meant for men. She admits that while magic might make it possible, the idea of a girl fighting physically is absurd to her. She orders Seabass to teach Evangeline a lesson, confident the master swordsman is far beyond her level. She adds a strict condition that Seabass must not leave any bruises on the princess. Christopher looks at the butler with concern, seemingly worried about the outcome of this mismatch. He orders Evangeline to take a wooden sword, though he remains skeptical of her chances. He asks her one last time if she is really serious about going through with this duel. Evangeline is fully aware that Seabass is a former military instructor and a master of swordsmanship. Her brother mocks her confidence, doubting she can beat a man just because she did some muscle training. Evangeline grips her weapon, telling him he will understand once he sees her capability. She takes a stance, preparing to face the harsh reality of the world of swordsmanship. She analyzes Seabass, noting that he possesses a noble heritage and skills incomparable to her previous life. She admits that in terms of pure technique, the current version of herself is no match for him. Seabass lunges forward with a powerful strike, apologizing in advance for the lesson he is about to teach. Evangeline observes his movement, recognizing him as a battle-hardened veteran. However, she remains calm, knowing that technique is not the only factor in a fight. Seabass's eyes widen in shock as his strike meets unexpected and overwhelming resistance. The impact of their wooden swords creates a shockwave that stuns the onlookers. Evangeline reflects on her past life, where she dedicated everything to mastering magic-based body enhancement. She had created a comprehensive system of techniques to reinforce the body using magical theories. Yet, in that past life, the one crucial thing she lacked was natural talent. Now, she realizes with a thrill that her new body is absolutely overflowing with that missing potential. She has finally obtained the innate talent for physical reinforcement she always craved. Seabass struggles to maintain his footing against the princess's immense power. He stares in disbelief, unable to comprehend the strength emanating from the young girl. Evangeline proves that for her, the word impossible does not exist. With a burst of speed and power, she smashes through Seabass's guard, sending him flying. Her mother watches in frozen horror as her daughter effortlessly overpowers the master swordsman. The sheer force of the blow sends Seabass crashing into the wall while her mother faints from shock. Evangeline stands victorious amidst the dust, her wooden sword held high. The maids rush to catch the fainting mother while Christopher stares at his sister in utter terror, calling her an armored princess. Evangeline wonders if she overdid it, realizing that her boisterous second life has truly begun. A status screen manifests in the darkness, identifying the dungeon's master as an A-rank elder lich. Evangeline stands unwavering before the ominous presence, her long hair flowing in the turbulent air. She opens her mouth to shout an incantation, her expression fierce and focused. At 16 years old, she realizes with triumph that she can finally wield the magic blade. Amidst the dungeon's architecture, she grips her glowing sword and vows to polish her skills until she surpasses Laius. Turning to her side, she cheerfully credits her butler Seabass for his guidance in achieving this milestone. Seabass stares at her in stunned silence, unable to comprehend the power radiating from his young charge. Internally, he asks himself with growing dread what kind of monster he has inadvertently created. He reflects on how he has been responsible for her swordsmanship training ever since the incident at the training grounds. In the heat of sparring, Evangeline parries a strike with a look of intense determination. Seabass recalls his initial excitement at witnessing such raw swordsmanship talent unfold before his eyes. However, he realized that when her skill was combined with her abnormal physical reinforcement technique, it became something else entirely. She absorbed an astounding quantity of magic and learned techniques one after another, defying the logic of being self-taught. He begins to suspect that the lady's current power level has escalated far beyond normal parameters. A massive letter S looms in his mind as he realizes she has already reached the realm of an S-rank adventurer. Terrified by the implications, Seabass leans in close to Evangeline to make a desperate request. He implores her to keep the true extent of her abilities completely hidden from the world. He warns her ominously that should she fail to do so, his own fate will be sealed. He envisions his own execution, knowing he will be held responsible and beheaded for creating such a warrior. Evangeline tilts her head in confusion, questioning why her butler is so distressed. Seabass clutches his head in panic, but Evangeline reminds him that her mother only banned muscle training. She beams innocently, stating that she acquired her magic completely on her own. She reasons that since Seabass only taught her swordsmanship, the blame for her magical power cannot fall on him. Seabass clutches his chest, trying to compose himself despite her irrefutable logic. He explodes with frustration, screaming that her recent actions were simply too dangerous. He envisions the terrifying elder lich she just faced, emphasizing the absurdity of the opponent. He reminds her that the plan was for her to safely learn dungeon combat by subjugating C-rank lizardmen. He stresses that the excursion was only permitted because his presence was supposed to guarantee her safety. Instead, she selfishly wandered off the approved route while he frantically ran around searching for her. He points to the background where the defeated Purgatory Overdecca lich lies, noting she killed it before he even found her. He begs her again, practically in tears, to never speak a word of this victory to her mother. Evangeline simply smiles and utters a non-committal response to his plea. She reassures him that if secrecy is his only concern, he has nothing to worry about. Seabass screams that secrecy isn't the only issue, but she casually adds that she subjugated the lizardmen too. Later in her room, the maid Letha commends Evangeline on her diligent swordsmanship training. As Letha brushes her hair, Evangeline agrees, looking pleased with her progress. The princess hums a happy tune, declaring she is having the time of her life. Letha sighs, reminding her to stay healthy but not to forget her mother's strict warnings. She emphasizes that becoming a bulky macho woman would be absolutely preposterous for a princess. Evangeline sweats nervously, promising to restrain herself from excessive muscle training. Letha calls out to her mistress, noticing a sudden shift in her demeanor. Evangeline closes her eyes, a look of intense concentration crossing her face. A sharp snapping sound echoes through the room as a fastening gives way. The sudden noise startles everyone, leaving them frozen in confusion. Letha panics, asking what Evangeline is doing, but the princess tells her to stay calm. Evangeline promises that the maid will understand the situation momentarily. She smiles with a hint of mischief, preparing to reveal her secret. Letha stammers in disbelief, misinterpreting the princess's actions completely. As Evangeline begins to disrobe, Letha wonders if she is being invited into a scandalous situation. The maid's mind races with rumors about the royal family's taste for same-sex romance. She blushes furiously, covering her face and protesting that the princess is a minor. Ignoring the maid's internal crisis, Evangeline lets a piece of undergarment fall from her hand. The item hits the floor with a massive, floor-cracking impact that defies physics. A crater forms in the stone floor beneath the small garment, leaving Letha staring in horror. Letha looks from the cracked floor to the princess, her romantic delusions shattered by heavy reality. Evangeline explains she actually wanted all her clothes made this way to maximize efficiency. She claims this is her way of keeping muscle training to a minimum as per instructions. Letha stares blankly, her face pale with shock at the weight of the clothing. She rushes to cover Evangeline, realizing the fabric itself must be something extraordinary. Adjusting her glasses, Letha identifies the material as coming from a monster that builds nests of steel. She screams in terror, recognizing the threads of the deadly Dragonia spider. She demands to know where Evangeline obtained such a rare and dangerous material. Evangeline looks thoughtful, realizing she forgot to mention that particular detail. She casually admits she recently visited the spider's nest and harvested the threads herself. Overwhelmed by the revelation of yet another S-rank exploit, Letha faints on the spot. Recalling a chaotic memory, voices scream about a princess disappearing into a dragon's nest alone. Disbelief echoes through the past as retainers react to the absurd situation. Evangeline reflects on that time, admitting her physical stats were off the charts and her behavior perhaps too tomboyish. She remembers the stern lecture she received about the sheer danger of encountering a dragon regardless of one's skill. In reality, she had instantly killed the beast with a magic blade, but she keeps that secret while focusing on the maid's current complaint about her underwear. The maid Letha scolds her for crafting items that flagrantly violate her mother's ban on muscle training. Evangeline trembles from physical exertion as she tries to bargain for just a tiny bit of leeway. Letha refuses to budge, imploring her mistress to have more self-awareness as a young girl. The door shuts with a finality that leaves the princess alone with her thoughts. Sitting on her bed, she ponders the elusive concept of femininity and what it means for her. She realizes that while she has mastered the speech of a noble, her internal mindset remains unchanged. A memory from her previous life as Alex begins to surface in her mind. She recalls a specific interaction with the healer Lilith regarding his appearance. Lilith hands back Alex's robes, having finished the necessary repairs. Alex thanks her, praising her sewing techniques for making the tattered garment look brand new. Lilith hesitantly asks if he would like to go shopping for proper clothes the next time they visit a town. She notes that he is usually so immersed in training that he completely neglects his personal appearance. Blushing, she insists that leaving him in such a state is a terrible waste of his potential. Alex looks at her in confusion, unsure why she considers his lack of fashion a waste. Lilith argues that as a member of the hero's party, he needs to look the part to be accepted by the people. Past Alex touches his chin, considering the logic that polishing a rough stone makes it shine. Returning to the present, Evangeline examines her arm and acknowledges that her current body is objectively beautiful. She admits that her mother and the maids are genuinely concerned about preserving that beauty. With a heavy sigh, she decides she must compromise and put some effort into her appearance. Inspiration strikes her, and she snaps her fingers with a sudden idea. She opens a drawer to reveal a sewing kit, preparing to modify her wardrobe. She rationalizes that putting effort into social acceptance is just another necessary step to becoming the strongest. Critiquing her current attire, she decides her dress and underwear are far too plain and functional. She clenches her fist, resolving to rework them into a much more exquisite and heavy design. Meanwhile, her mother interprets Evangeline's new interest in clothing as a sign she is moving away from swordsmanship. The Empress smiles with relief, believing her daughter is finally developing the proper self-consciousness of a princess. Letha sweats nervously, deciding to strictly conceal the fact that Evangeline is actually crafting muscle training underwear. The maid bows, agreeing to proceed with the mother's plan while hiding the heavy truth. Her mother declares that the upcoming debutante evening party will be the stage where Evangeline sheds her reputation as the armored princess. She pauses in deep contemplation, her chin resting on her hand as she considers a problem. She reviews a catalog of feminine clothing, recalling her stated intention to remake the delicate items despite their style. The solution appears to be simple, as she reasons that adding a significant amount of lace will make the alterations acceptable. Visualizing the task ahead, she simulates the sewing motions, planning to execute the modifications in a specific manner. Satisfaction washes over her as she displays the finished, frilly garment with a cheerful guess that the result is correct. The outcome is a resounding success in her mind, visualized as a perfect numerical score. Reality suddenly crashes in as she realizes the time, panicking because she has waited until the last minute to prepare. A knock sounds at the door and the maid Letha announces her presence before receiving permission to enter the room. Letha steps inside with a polite apology, completely unprepared for the sight that greets her eyes. Shock instantly paralyzes the maid, leaving her speechless as she confronts the unexpected scene before her. Her mind races to scandalous conclusions, recalling rumors that many women in the royal family have a taste for same-sex relationships. Blushing furiously, she remembers the mistress recently showing off specific underwear designed for muscle training. Seeing the mistress with her buttocks protruded, Letha becomes convinced this is a direct romantic invitation. Unaware of the misunderstanding, the mistress is actually stretching to maintain flexibility and muscle speed for combat. The maid finds herself internally wavering, admitting that she would not mind such advances from someone as beautiful as her mistress. Trembling with conflicted emotion, Letha struggles between a desire to reply and an inability to reject the feelings growing within the mistress. A sudden realization of the impropriety forces her to mentally scream that she absolutely cannot go through with it. Desperation takes hold as she prays to the Almighty for guidance on how to navigate this moral crisis. The sheer stress of the moment causes her soul to briefly leave her body in a comically spectral display. Regaining her composure with a deep breath, she decides the best strategy is to pretend she never saw anything at all. Oblivious to the maid's turmoil, The mistress innocently asks for clarification on the term debutante. Letha adjusts her glasses and confirms the topic with a simple, professional affirmative. She explains that the event is a prestigious gathering where only royalty are permitted to attend. It is described as a first-class banquet serving as a venue to deepen relationships while wearing gorgeous clothes. Summarizing the situation requires only a brief phrase to drive the point home. The maid enthusiastically declares that this event marks the mistress's official debut into high society. Servants immediately swarm the room, bearing the necessary dresses and accessories to begin the transformation. The mistress points to herself in sheer disbelief, shocked that she is the focus of such a momentous occasion. The narrative shifts location to the Phoenix Hall situated within the Imperial Palace Annex. Walking through the garden, Letha frets over whether Lady Eva will be able to manage the social pressure. She reassures herself that as long as Eva hides her strange obsession with muscle training, her behavior is flawless. The doors are thrown open to reveal the transformed young lady to the waiting public. Bystanders are immediately captivated, wondering if Eva is the most lovely figure in all of history. Her mother beams with pride, agreeing that Eva looks like a heavenly maiden and affirming their kinship. However, the mother interrupts the moment to ask a casual question. She inquires about a peculiar, repetitive motion that Eva has been performing throughout the entire event. Eva answers plainly that she is performing calf raises. She lectures her mother that one cannot waste a single moment when it comes to strengthening muscles, shocking the maid. A mental diagram appears, detailing how lifting the heels places stress on the gastrocnemius and soleus muscles. Eva enthusiastically explains how the exercise works on her leg muscles even while she is dressed in a ball gown. The queen reacts with a heavy, exasperated sigh at her daughter's incurable fixation. She openly expresses her deep worry regarding Eva's future prospects given this behavior. The situation leaves her muttering in disbelief at the absurdity of it all. Prince Richard of the Rosgard Empire arrives on the scene, noting the presence of the concubines. He spots his youngest sister among the crowd and turns his attention toward her. Letha confronts the prince, asking why he is loitering in front of the main entrance instead of entering. He explains that his group was forced to go through the men's entrance, which poses a problem. A mocking laugh escapes him as he reveals the deliberate nature of the inconvenience. He arrogantly admits that he was the one who instructed them to take that specific path. Eva reacts with pure confusion, unable to grasp the reason behind his actions. Richard mentions rumors that Eva has been studying swordsmanship despite being a girl. He sneers that if she picks up a sword, it is only natural to assume she wants to be accepted as a man. He lectures that women are expected to enter high society at an early age. In contrast, he states that men enter society only when they turn 20 or become established warriors. He implies that it is impossible for the youngest child to ever meet those masculine requirements. Eva bristles with anger at the insult, demanding to know what he just said. The prince asserts that men and women each have their own distinct roles to play in the world. He declares that women should remain silent pawns and devote themselves solely to making children. A numerical marker appears, signaling a transition in the narrative flow. Laius formed a party based on merit regardless of gender. Eva counters Richard's argument by reminding him that the very country he founded is built upon principles he is currently ignoring. She pierces through his logic, questioning how he can preach about the strict roles of men and women while disregarding that fundamental history. Shifting her tone from philosophical to practical, she addresses him directly as her older brother to draw his attention. Her gaze drops to his waist, where she identifies the shining blade as a mithril sword given only to the men of the imperial family. She offers a cold compliment on the weapon's craftsmanship, noting that it appears to be incredibly sturdy. Richard smugly agrees, sneering that she will never be able to hold something of such prestige in her entire life. Ignoring his taunt, she steps forward with a decisive impact, her foot planting firmly on the ground. The prince scoffs at her advance, arrogantly lecturing that destroying a weapon made of mithril is a condition for being recognized as an established warrior. He is suddenly caught off guard as she readies herself for an attack, his confidence wavering into confusion. Eva channels her energy, declaring that she is using full-force body reinforcement to enhance her physical capabilities. Panic flashes across Richard's face as he belatedly realizes her intent and stammers out a confused question. With a grunt of exertion, she brings her bare hand down like a blade upon the legendary metal. The prince's eyes widen to their limit, his expression frozen in a mask of absolute shock. The mithril blade shatters instantly under the impact, sending shards flying while the bystanders gasp in horror. Eva looks down at her unharmed hand with disappointment, asking dryly if that is the extent of Mithril's durability. She dismissively remarks that the legendary metal does not hold a candle to her beloved orichalcum exercise bar. Richard lets out a guttural, incoherent scream of terror as the reality of the situation hits him. He babbles in disbelief, unable to comprehend that she broke a mithril sword with her bare hands. The maid scrambles to catch the collapsing prince, shouting at him to pull himself together in front of the guests. The narrative shifts to the secluded VIP room of the Phoenix Hall where Richard retreats to vent his fury. A fist slams violently onto the table as he curses the humiliation he just endured. Hyperventilating, he obsesses over the impossibility of the event, repeating that she broke his mithril sword with her bare hands. He desperately rationalizes the feat by convincing himself she must have received a physical strengthening tool from their father. Composing himself with a cold resolve, he decides that the method she used matters not in the grand scheme. He takes a sip of wine, vowing that he will soon witness a look of absolute despair on her face. A shadowed conspirator asks if he has made his final decision, to which Richard gives a firm affirmative. He reveals that the main army led by his brother is currently away on a campaign to subjugate the southern Khmer's tribe. He gleefully points out that because of this campaign, the capital city is currently completely empty of its defenders. Ambition burns in his eyes as he declares that he will never get another opportunity as perfect as this one. He confirms that all necessary arrangements for the coup have been prepared. The force he has assembled consists of 100 elites from the Assassin's Guild. Bolstering their numbers are 3,000 warriors from the barbarian tribe he secretly hid near the capital. He acknowledges the risk that the mercenaries might try to take over the country themselves if he makes a mistake controlling them. With chilling indifference, he states that he cares not about the potential consequences to the nation. His motivation is rooted in deep resentment that his father chose his brother over him to be the next emperor. He sneers at the progressive policies of his brother, such as establishing an order of female knights and entrusting military affairs to women. He justifies his treason by claiming the country would be doomed before long if such an idiot took the throne. He outlines his plan to throw tonight's royal party into disarray and force his enemies to kneel before him. Manic laughter bubbles up from his throat as he imagines the frightened looks on their faces when they hear about the attack. Steeling himself for the atrocity he is about to commit, he gives the final signal. The command is given to let the rebellion begin immediately. Back at the party, Eva pauses and looks over her shoulder, sensing a shift in the atmosphere. Delight washes over Eva as she revels in the flavor of the cake, exclaiming that she never imagined it could taste this good. She ponders the nature of the sweetness, questioning how such a delightful sensation could be considered a peculiar characteristic solely for women. Her mother attempts to interrupt her culinary reverie with a hesitant interjection to get her attention. The queen stares in absolute horror at her daughter, demanding to know how she is physically capable of eating such an enormous amount. Unfazed by the lecture, Eva continues to devour plates of food while her mother scolds her, flanked by towering stacks of empty dishes. Whispers circulate among the guests, who remark that it would be better if she were more feminine, citing her nicknames of Miss Barbell and Best in the World. Eva pauses mid-bite, a look of realization crossing her face as the weight of the social scrutiny begins to sink in. Her mother closes her fan with a sharp snap, grimly informing Eva that this critical judgment is exactly how high society views her. A voice cuts through the tension as Prince Richard approaches, asking with a smirk if she is enjoying herself. Eva formally acknowledges her brother with a polite greeting, though the tension remains palpable. She attempts to defend her earlier actions, stating that she simply entered according to the formal procedures outlined for the event. Richard smiles sinisterly, pointing out that by entering through that specific gate, she entered the venue as a man. He extends a hand and declares that as a consequence of her choice, she must still undergo the traditional ritual. The maid Letha stammers in shock, crying out that such a demand is taking things entirely too far. The queen steps forward with a steely gaze, demanding that her son explain exactly what this ritual entails. Richard dismisses the concern with a wave of his hand, describing the event as nothing more than a simple mock battle. He explains that since all men of the royal family are soldiers, their first social gathering serves as a coming-of-age ceremony to demonstrate their strength. The queen snaps her fan open in anger, retorting that it is not that simple and calling the ritual a public humiliation. A flashback reveals the customary nature of the ritual, where the initiate must fight the strongest of the empire's distinguished fighters. The example given is a formidable warrior, such as the champion of the Empire's swordsmanship tournament. Eva looks up with innocent curiosity, asking if that implies the challenger has absolutely no chance of winning the encounter. Her mother confirms this grim reality, explaining that the goal is to beat the initiate until they can no longer stand, forcing them to declare complete subordination to the Empire. Eva swallows hard, her eyes widening as she processes the brutality of the tradition she has unwittingly signed up for. Richard stands triumphantly, declaring that if Eva insists on learning swordsmanship, she must face the consequences of that ambition. A dark grin spreads across his face as he vows that no matter what happens, he will treat her exactly as a man. With a sharp snap of his fingers, he signals for the proceedings to begin immediately. A heavy barrier slams down, clearing the space and signaling the arrival of the designated opponent. A hulking figure steps onto the makeshift arena, identified by Richard as the champion of last year's martial arts tournament. Eva questions the choice of opponent, confused as to why she is facing a martial artist instead of a swordsman. Richard explains that while he knows she is skilled with a sword, bloodshed is strictly forbidden inside the royal court. He clarifies the rules, stating that participants are not allowed to strike or utilize any weapons during the combat. Eva confirms her understanding that the fight is restricted to joint locks, chokeholds, and throws, which Richard gleefully verifies. Internally, Richard reasons that allowing strikes would be dangerous due to Eva's unconventional strength, making a grappling match the safer option. He mentally plots his true objective, using this ritual as a distraction to call in his rebellion soldiers while security is lax. His thoughts turn to his father, condemning the Emperor's naivety for believing that such traditions could be easily upended. Richard's internal monologue reveals his deep misogyny, vowing never to tolerate women like Eva living freely in his new empire. He concludes that the outcome of the match is irrelevant, as long as the chaos allows his plans to proceed without negligence. Eva admits to her mother that she does not have experience in such battles, prompting the queen to worry if she knows any grappling techniques. Richard watches with anticipation, noting that while striking relies on power, the world of grappling is dominated entirely by technique. He is confident that against a skilled grappler, Eva's brute force will simply not be enough to secure a victory. The crowd watches in tense silence as the two combatants face off in the center of the hall. The champion smirks confidently, certain of his superiority over the young princess standing before him. Eva steels herself, her expression shifting from uncertainty to focused determination as she prepares for the engagement. The signal to commence is given, and the champion immediately lunges forward to initiate the attack. He closes the distance instantly, wrapping his arms around Eva to neutralize her movements. Eva struggles as the champion skillfully maneuvers her into a disadvantageous position on the ground. He successfully locks in a triangle choke, tightening his legs around her neck to cut off her air. Laughter erupts from the champion as he mocks how easy it was to trap her in the submission hold. He arrogantly thinks that all he has to do now is wait for her to faint from the chokehold to end the match. Eva, pinned and choking, internally confesses that she definitely does not have any knowledge about martial arts. The champion's expression suddenly shifts from arrogance to shock as he feels an inexplicable force working against him. Eva's inner voice declares that while she lacks technique, she possesses an overwhelming amount of physical strength. With a surge of power, she lifts the massive champion off the ground while he is still holding onto the choke, preparing for a devastating slam. The onlookers, including the Queen and Richard, gasp in disbelief as the impossible unfolds before their eyes. Eva roars with exertion as she brings the champion down with earth-shattering force. The impact of the powerbomb slams the champion into the stone floor, breaking his hold and silencing the room. Richard's face contorts in sheer bewilderment, his mind unable to process the feat of strength he just witnessed. The champion lies unconscious in a crater of cracked tiles, completely defeated by the single maneuver. Eva stands over her fallen opponent, panting slightly, before turning to address her stunned brother. She calmly asks Richard a rhetorical question, challenging his earlier assertion about the nature of combat. She corrects his theory, asserting that in the world of martial arts, physical strength actually solves everything. The tension instantly evaporates as Eva spots the dessert table, her face lighting up with delight. She marvels at the gorgeous setup of the hall, seemingly forgetting the violent altercation that just occurred. The camera pans over a luxurious spread of cakes and sweets, looking pristine and inviting. Her mother, recovering from the shock, suggests they enjoy a small break since there is still time before the party officially starts. Eva happily agrees and immediately shoves a forkful of cake into her mouth, exclaiming goodness at the taste. The hall is left in stunned silence as bystanders gasp, struggling to process that Eva just physically picked up her opponent and slammed him with a powerbomb. Eva's mother, Vanessa, hides her mouth behind a fan and lets out a strained, nervous chuckle to mask her mortification. Internally, the Empress frantically recites the social expectations that ladies of the Empire ought to be modest and highlight the elegance of men. Her train of thought derails into a single, desperate question of why this situation has unfolded in such a manner. Her internal monologue culminates in a mental scream of despair, questioning why her daughter felt the need to execute a professional wrestling move like a powerbomb. Overwhelmed by the breach of etiquette, she fatalistically concludes that her social standing is completely over. A sudden sound effect cuts through the tension, shifting the focus away from the mother's internal crisis. A deep, commanding voice interrupts the moment, calling out Vanessa's name to draw her attention. Vanessa immediately straightens and responds to the newcomer, who is identified as Oliver Kingsley, the 8th Emperor of the Rosgard Empire. The Emperor begins to list a series of crude nicknames, reciting titles like Armored Princess, the Muscle Training Lady, Miss Barbell, and Best in the World. He notes that these are merely a few among the various monikers for his daughter that have reached his ears. Despite his knowledge of her reputation, he admits with a serious expression that he never actually expected her to execute a powerbomb in public. Vanessa frantically tries to smooth things over, stammering that Eva is indeed just as tomboyish as the rumors suggest. The Emperor interrupts her explanations with a single, decisive transition word to shift the topic. He states that while it is most regrettable above all else that she was born a girl, he cannot deny that her strength is the real deal. Turning his full attention to his daughter, he addresses her directly by name. He poses a fundamental question to her, asking earnestly why she desires such physical strength. Eva places a hand over her chest, her expression becoming serious as she prepares to answer his query. She begins to speak, addressing him as father, but her explanation is suddenly cut short. A loud, jarring noise interrupts the conversation, drawing everyone's attention to the upper levels of the hall. Armed soldiers suddenly flood the room, marching in with weapons drawn and surrounding the guests. The ladies of the court scream in terror as the peaceful gathering turns into a scene of potential violence. Confusion reigns among the guards and guests, with someone shouting to demand the meaning of this intrusion. A loud, maniacal laughter echoes from the top of the stairs, chilling the blood of those below. Vanessa and the Emperor look up in shock, their expressions freezing as they recognize the source of the laughter. Richard steps forward on the landing, signaling that he is about to address the confused crowd. He arrogantly offers to explain the situation to those who do not understand what is happening. The Emperor stares up at his son in disbelief, uttering his name with a mixture of shock and horror. Richard reveals that the troops surrounding them are the Third Army under his command and notes that the majority of the Imperial Army is currently away on an expedition. He smugly tells his father that he will let him fill in the rest of the details himself regarding the implications. Realization dawns on the Emperor's face, and he curses his son, calling him a bastard. He demands to know if Richard is truly saying that he is instigating a rebellion against the throne. Richard corrects him, framing his treason as a revolution for the sake of justice. He condescendingly asks if the Emperor understands, blaming his father's overconfidence for putting the country in danger. The Emperor retorts that it is impossible to occupy the capital with just the Third Army, reminding him of the Order of Guard Knights. Richard mocks him, stating that even a foolish emperor would take at least the bare minimum of precautions. He brings up the 3,000 Khmer's men who were supposedly lurking around the capital's outskirts. The Emperor is aghast, asking if Richard has betrayed their country to those he considers dogs. Richard scoffs at the word, betrayed, claiming he has forbidden the barbarians from touching the land itself. However, he reveals with a cruel smile that he promised them the right to rampage and pillage the populace instead. He rants that they have lost the status of a perfect military nation, blaming the first emperor's ideals for leading to a spineless coward ascending the throne. He declares that the era of weakness ends today. Throwing his arms wide, he proclaims that from this moment onwards, he, Richard Kingsley, is the legitimate ruler of the empire. He points a finger toward a set of doors, indicating an escape route that leads from the courtyard to outside the capital. He offers a twisted mercy, stating he will postpone the start of the massacre by exactly 30 minutes. His voice rises to a shout as he commands the crowd to start running immediately. Amidst the panic, Eva winks playfully at the camera and comments that this situation is bad. She internally notes that when one is given the chance to escape, it is indeed hard to resist the temptation. The guests scream in terror and begin to stampede toward the exits in a chaotic wave. A loyal soldier approaches the emperor, calling out to him urgently. He informs the emperor that the rearguard has arrived and requests that he escape while he can. The emperor refuses to run away just as Richard predicted, stating that it is his fault that Richard plotted this rebellion. He grips the hilt of his sword, declaring that above all else, he has a duty to stand his ground. He roars that he cannot allow the commander of an army to run away while leaving women and children behind to suffer. The soldiers watching him gulp, visibly moved by their leader's resolve in the face of overwhelming odds. Sound effects indicate the soldiers are readying their weapons for a last stand. They declare with one voice that they shall stand with him to the bitter end. Eva analyzes the battlefield, noting their side has 200 soldiers against the enemy's 500 or more. She grimly concludes that the difference in fighting strength is overwhelming. The emperor looks over his shoulder with a shocked expression. He calls out Eva's name, asking if she failed to escape with the others. He urgently orders her to quickly get behind the line of soldiers for protection. A loud grinding sound echoes through the hall as Eva places her hand on a structural element. The emperor stares in bewilderment, his mind struggling to process the object she is holding. He thinks that the object is far too crude to be called a weapon. He describes it as thick, round, and above all else, completely solid. He realizes with horror that it is a massive pillar made entirely out of marble. Eva smiles innocently, holding the massive stone column as she addresses her father. She effortlessly hoists the architectural feature onto her shoulder, announcing she is there to assist him. With a mighty roar, she swings the marble pillar like a baseball bat. The enemy soldiers freeze in terror, stammering and begging her to wait as the massive object approaches. Richard screams in incoherent terror as the massive pillar plows through his army, sending bodies flying. The enemy soldiers panic and scatter as the sheer mass of the stone weapon devastates their ranks. Eva hugs the pillar affectionately after her swing, smoke rising from the destruction she just caused. A close-up of her face shows her smiling amidst the chaos while someone screams asking what the hell is happening.